I never thought I'd be telling this story. Not to anyone. But there comes a point when keeping things bottled up just doesn't make sense anymore. So, here it is. The whole ugly truth about how I almost married the wrong woman and what happened when I discovered who she really was. My name is David Hartwell, 55 years old, retired military officer, and until recently, I thought I was one of the luckiest men in Charleston. After losing my wife Catherine to cancer 7 years ago, I'd resigned myself to a quiet life alone in the house we'd bought together on Sullivan's Island. Nice place, 3 bedrooms, wraparound porch, and a view of the Atlantic that takes your breath away on clear mornings. I'd been comfortable, but lonely. That's the thing about spending 30 years with someone. When they're gone, the silence is deafening. Then Vanessa Parker walked into my life at a charity gala for veterans. She was serving drinks, laughing with the guests, her honey blonde hair catching the light. 38 years old, she told me later. Young enough to turn heads, but mature enough that I didn't feel like some creepy old man when she smiled at me. She had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room worth talking to. You look like you could use something stronger than that club soda, she'd said, nodding at my glass. I smiled. Designated driver tonight. Noble of you. She leaned in closer. But who takes care of you, I wonder? That was 18 months ago. And for a year and a half, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Second chances don't come around often at my age. When she said yes to my proposal 6 months ago, I felt like a man half my age. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. But when you want something to be real badly enough, you can be blind to a lot of things. Our first date had been at a small Italian place on King Street. I remember being nervous, feeling rusty at the whole dating game. She wore a blue dress that matched her eyes and ordered the most expensive wine on the menu without even glancing at the price. When the check came, she made a show of reaching for her purse, but her movements were so deliberately slow that I had already grabbed the bill. Next time's on me, she'd promised with a wink. There never was a next time on her. Always some excuse. She'd forgotten her wallet, or there was an issue with her credit card, or she'd just paid some enormous bill for her mother's medical treatments. I didn't mind. I had the money, and seeing her smile was worth every penny. After 3 months of dating, she started dropping hints about moving in together. That drive from my place to yours gets so tiresome, she'd sigh, tracing patterns on my chest as we lay in bed, and it's silly to pay rent on my apartment when I spend most nights here anyway. It made sense. I invited her to move in the next day. She had her stuff packed and ready within hours. Surprisingly little for someone who always dressed so well. Just 2 suitcases and a few boxes. Later, I found out she'd been living with her mother all along. The apartment just a convenient fiction. The changes to my house were subtle at first. A new throw pillow here. Different curtains there. Then came the furniture. A new sofa because mine was so outdated. A different dining set because the old one didn't match the aesthetic she was going for. I drew the line when she suggested renovating the master bathroom, the one Catherine and I had designed together just before her diagnosis. It's just so old-fashioned, Vanessa had complained, wrinkling her nose at the clawfoot tub Catherine had loved. It stays, I'd said firmly. One of the few times I'd put my foot down. She'd pouted for days afterward, but eventually conceded. Looking back, I realized she was just biding her time. Why fight over a bathroom when she was playing the long game for the whole house? It was 3 days before our wedding when everything fell apart. Or maybe that's when everything came together. Depends on how you look at it. I'd been at Thompson's Menswear for my final fitting. The suit was charcoal gray, custom-tailored with a subtle blue pinstripe that matched my eyes. Catherine always said blue was my color. Stand up straight, soldier, joked my old friend Jake Sullivan, slapping me on the back. He'd served with me in Desert Storm and now owned the local hardware store. You look like you're preparing for a court-martial, not a wedding. Leave him alone, said Chris Bennett, another friend from my army days. David's walking back into the line of fire voluntarily. Show some respect for the fallen. We all laughed, but there was something in Chris's eyes. A question, maybe. You're sure about this, right? He asked later when we were having a beer at O'Malley's down the street. I mean, Vanessa is great and all, but it's been a quick engagement. I took a swig of my IPA. When you know, you know. Chris nodded but didn't look convinced. It's just. Catherine was one of a kind and Vanessa is so different. That's the point, I said, perhaps a bit sharply. I'm not trying to replace Catherine. Of course not, Chris backpedaled. It's just Linda mentioned that Vanessa was asking her some questions about your finances last week. Seemed odd for casual conversation. I brushed it off. She's just being practical. We're combining our lives. But the seed was planted. That little doubt that makes you pay closer attention. The truth is, there had been other signs I'd ignored. Like how Vanessa always seemed to run into old friends whenever we were out. Attractive men who looked at her a bit too long, touched her arm a bit too familiarly. She'd introduced me proudly, but there was something performative about it, as if she were showing me off rather than connecting two parts of her life. There was the time I found a receipt for a hotel room in her purse when I was looking for car keys. When I asked about it, she'd laughed it off. A girls' weekend with friends from college. Didn't I tell you about that? I believed her because I wanted to believe her. Or the mysterious phone calls she'd take on the porch, speaking in hushed tones, ending abruptly when I approached. Just my mother, she'd say with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She's having trouble with her medication again. That evening, I decided to surprise Vanessa at her mother's house where she was staying until the wedding. For tradition's sake, she'd insisted. I picked up a bouquet of white peonies, her favorite, from Rose's flower shop on King Street, and drove the 20 minutes to the old Victorian where Linda Parker had raised Vanessa after her father left them. It was a warm night, the kind where the air hangs heavy with jasmine and the sounds of cicadas. I parked a little down the street, thinking I'd sneak up and surprise her. The lights were on in the kitchen, and the window was cracked open to let in the evening breeze. I was about 10 feet from the porch when I heard their voices, clear as day, floating out into the night air. Don't worry so much, Mom. Everything's going according to plan. Vanessa's voice had a tone I'd never heard before. Harder, more calculating. I just don't like playing with fire, honey. David seems like a decent man. I froze, the bouquet hanging limply at my side. Decent, sure. Decent house, decent pension, decent life insurance policy. It's all very decent. The way she said the word made it sound like something disgusting. And what if he wants a prenup? He's not stupid, Vanessa. A laugh sharp like breaking glass. Already handled. I've been dropping little comments about how prenups are so unromantic. How they're for people who don't really believe in forever. He ate it up with a spoon. My blood went cold, but I couldn't move. And if he finds out about Marcus? Her mother sounded nervous. He won't. Marcus knows to lay low until after the wedding. Once I'm Mrs. David Hartwell, it gets a lot harder for David to cut me out, even if things go south. South Carolina isn't exactly friendly to quickie divorces. I just don't want you to end up like me, that's all. Left with nothing but a child to raise. Mom, please. He's not Dad. David's a total Boy Scout, honorable to a fault. The man actually tears up during the national anthem for God's sake. He's the perfect mark. The flowers fell from my hand. I must have made a sound, because there was a sudden silence from inside. Did you hear something? Linda asked. Probably just Mrs. Jenkins' cat again, Vanessa replied. That thing's always prowling around. I still think this is risky, Linda continued. What about that woman who came by last week? The one asking questions about you. My ears perked up. Someone was asking questions about Vanessa. Just some busybody from my old job in Atlanta. Nothing to worry about. She didn't seem like a coworker, Vanessa. She seemed like law enforcement. There was a long pause. When Vanessa spoke again, her voice was tight with anger. I told you it's handled. She's got nothing on me. And after Saturday, it won't matter anyway. Once I'm married to David, I'll have access to his accounts. We can pay off those debts and start fresh. Debts? Linda sounded alarmed. What debts? I thought you said the Atlanta situation was just about that man who claimed you stole his car. It's complicated, Mom. But trust me, marrying David solves everything. 3 months tops, I'll convince him to add me to the house deed. 6 months, I'll have him rewrite his will. A year from now, who knows? Maybe widowhood will suit me. I staggered backward, nearly tripping over a garden gnome. Widowhood. Was she actually talking about Vanessa? Linda sounded genuinely shocked. You can't mean that. Relax, Mom. I'm just saying life insurance pays out more for accidents than natural causes. Something to keep in mind. I didn't wait to hear more. I walked quickly back to my truck, my mind racing. The peonies lay forgotten on the grass, their petals already beginning to brown at the edges in the summer heat. By the time I got home, rage had replaced shock. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and downed it in one go, something I hadn't done since my early army days. The burn in my throat felt good, real. I needed that reality check. I played the conversation over and over in my head. Decent pension, life insurance policy, the perfect mark, and who the hell was Marcus? I picked up my phone and scrolled to Vanessa's number. My thumb hovered over the call button. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, demand an explanation. But the tactical part of my brain, the part that had kept me alive through 2 tours in hostile territory, knew better. Instead, I opened the voice recorder app. I hadn't planned what I was going to do yet, but evidence never hurts. I called my sister Rachel instead. Rachel is 5 years younger than me, sharp as a tack, and has never been afraid to tell me when I'm being an idiot. She answered on the 3rd ring. David, it's almost midnight. Everything okay? No. My voice sounded strange, even to my own ears. Can you come over? 30 minutes later, Rachel was sitting across from me at my kitchen table, her face a mixture of shock and fury as I recounted what I'd overheard. That conniving little, she stopped herself. I knew there was something off about her. The way she was always steering conversations toward your house, your retirement package. I thought maybe I was just being overprotective. Well, you weren't, I said, pouring us both another drink. The question is, what do I do now? Rachel looked at me like I'd grown a second head. What do you mean, what do you do? You call off the wedding, obviously. Obviously, I agreed. But that feels too simple. Simple is good, David. Simple means you don't marry a gold-digging liar who's apparently cheating on you with someone named Marcus. I shook my head. You don't understand. If I just call it off, she walks away clean, free to find some other decent guy to con. And everyone in town will wonder what happened. They'll speculate. Some will blame me. Who cares what people think? You'll know the truth. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark water beyond my property. I care. I've lived in this town my whole life, except for my time in service. My reputation matters to me. And I don't want her to get away with this. Rachel was quiet for a moment. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, I turned back to face her. I'm thinking that if Vanessa wants a show, I'll give her one she'll never forget. Rachel's eyes widened. David, what are you planning? Something fitting, I said, a cold smile forming on my lips. Something very, very public. You're not thinking of confronting her at the wedding, are you? In front of everyone. That's exactly what I'm thinking. Rachel leaned forward. David, that's crazy. You'd humiliate yourself as much as her. Not if I do it right. I sat back down, the plan forming in my mind. Listen, she's made me look like a fool for months. She's been laughing at me behind my back, planning to take everything I've worked for. Hell, she even hinted at wanting me dead for the insurance money. You expect me to just walk away quietly? Rachel sighed. No, I guess not. Not when you put it that way. She took a sip of her drink. So, what exactly do you have in mind? I outlined my plan. Rachel argued with me for an hour, trying to talk me out of it, but eventually she saw I wouldn't be swayed. Fine, she finally conceded. But if you're going to do this, you need more than just that voice recording. You need to know who this Marcus is for starters. She was right. The next morning, while Vanessa was at her final dress fitting, I did something I'd never done before. I went through her things. Not the stuff she kept at my place, which was carefully curated to present the image she wanted me to see. No, I went to her mother's house, timing my visit for when I knew Linda would be at her weekly bridge game. I used the spare key Vanessa had given me for emergencies. The house was quiet, slightly musty. I went straight to the guest room where Vanessa had been staying. Her suitcase was open on the bed, half-packed for a planned honeymoon to the Bahamas. In the closet, behind a stack of shoe boxes, I found a locked metal cash box. The key was hidden inside a small sachet of lavender in her underwear drawer. Not exactly Fort Knox-level security. Inside the box were documents. Financial statements showing significant debt. Letters from collection agencies. And most damning of all, a small notebook detailing what could only be described as a con artist playbook. It contained notes on me. My routines, my preferences, even the names of my closest friends. But it also had similar information on other men. Gerald Thompson, age 62, widower, owns construction company. Howard Pierce, 58, divorced, investment banker. And Marcus Blackwell, 42, married but unhappy, owns 3 car dealerships in the Southeast. There were copies of text messages between Vanessa and Marcus. Screenshots of bank transfers. A crude timeline that showed their relationship going back at least 2 years, well before she'd met me. The most recent entry was dated just 3 days earlier, M worried about wedding. Promised big payoff once DH assets secured. DH. David Hartwell. Me. I took photos of everything with my phone, careful to leave the documents exactly as I'd found them. As I was replacing the box, I noticed a business card that had fallen behind the dresser. I picked it up. Sophia Reynolds, Special Investigator, South Carolina Department of Financial Crimes. On the back was a handwritten note, "Call me before it's too late." I pocketed the card and left, my heart pounding, but my mind clearer than it had been in months. Back at home, I called the number on the card. Special Investigator Reynolds. A crisp female voice answered. "My name is David Hartwell," I said. "I believe you have been looking into someone named Vanessa Parker." There was a pause. "Mr. Hartwell, I've been hoping you'd call. Do you have time to meet today?" 2 hours later, I was sitting in a small coffee shop off the beaten path, far from anywhere Vanessa might go. Sophia Reynolds was a stern-looking woman in her 40s with shrewd eyes and no-nonsense attire. Vanessa Parker isn't her real name, she told me without preamble. It's Victoria Palmer. She's wanted in 3 states for fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, even though I'd suspected something similar. How does she operate? She finds wealthy men, usually widowers or recent divorcees, gains their trust, marries them, then cleans them out. Sometimes she works with a partner, a man named Marcus Blackwell. He poses as the other man to help create drama and distract from her financial maneuvers. And the thing about her mother's medical bills? Reynolds shook her head. Linda Parker is her actual mother, but she's healthy as a horse. She's Vanessa's accomplice, though we've never been able to prove it. What about Atlanta? Her last mark was a retired surgeon named William Chandler. She married him, convinced him to change his will, then filed for divorce, claiming emotional abuse. The courts awarded her a substantial settlement. But she got greedy, tried to take some family heirlooms that were specifically excluded from the divorce agreement. Mr. Chandler reported them stolen, and we finally had something solid to go on. Why haven't you arrested her? Lack of evidence. These cases are hard to prove without victims willing to testify, and most men are too embarrassed to admit they've been conned. Plus, she's careful. She makes sure everything she does falls into legal gray areas. Unethical, but not necessarily criminal. I told Reynolds what I'd overheard, offering to share the recording. She was interested, but cautious. It's helpful, but still not enough for an arrest. We need more. What if I could get her to confess, or at least incriminate herself further? Reynolds studied me. What are you suggesting, Mr. Hartwell? I explained my plan for the wedding. She listened carefully, occasionally making notes. It's risky, she said when I finished, and somewhat unorthodox from a law enforcement perspective. But not illegal. No, not illegal. Just unusual. She tapped her pen against her notepad. If you're determined to go through with this, I'd like to be present. Not officially, I can't intervene without solid evidence, but I can observe. And if Miss Palmer does incriminate herself, I'll be there to hear it. Exactly. She handed me a small device. This is a better recorder than your phone. More sensitive, longer battery life. If you're going to do this, do it right. I spent the next day making calls. Old friends, former comrades in arms, people who owed me favors. By dawn, I had the bones of a plan. By noon, as Vanessa texted me sweet nothings about how excited she was for our big day, the plan had flesh on it. By evening, as I sat through the rehearsal dinner, smiling and playing the happy groom-to-be, it was fully formed. The rehearsal dinner was at the Charleston Grill, Vanessa's choice, naturally. One of the most expensive restaurants in town. I watched her work the room, charming my friends, laughing with the right people, touching my arm possessively whenever anyone approached us. She was good. I had to give her that. Cold feet, asked Pastor Mitchell, sidling up to me at the bar. He'd known me since I was a boy. Had officiated at Catherine's funeral. Not at all, I lied smoothly, just taking it all in. Good, he nodded, but his eyes were searching my face. You know, David, it's not uncommon for grooms to have doubts, especially when they've loved and lost before. I took a sip of my whiskey. No doubts, Pastor. Tomorrow will be exactly what it needs to be. He patted my shoulder. Well, I'm glad to hear it. Vanessa seems lovely. Different from Catherine, of course, but that's to be expected. Very different, I agreed, watching as she threw her head back in laughter at something my cousin Edward said. The diamond ring I'd given her, 3 carats, princess cut, set in platinum, caught the light and winked at me mockingly. Across the room, I caught sight of a familiar face. Sophia Reynolds, dressed in civilian clothes, posing as a waitress. Our eyes met briefly, and she gave me a small nod. Everything was in place. Later, as we said our good nights in the parking lot, Vanessa pressed herself against me, her perfume enveloping me in a cloud of jasmine and something muskier. 24 more hours, she whispered, her lips brushing my ear. And then I'm all yours. Forever. I pulled her close, one hand at the small of her back. Forever is a long time, I said softly. She looked up at me, a slight furrow between her perfectly shaped eyebrows. Having second thoughts, soldier boy. I smiled and kissed her forehead. Not a single one. Good. She stepped back, smoothing her dress. Because I've already got my eye on new drapes for the living room. Those blue ones you have are so bachelor pad. We can't have that, I said, keeping my voice light. No, we can't. Oh, and I was thinking we should convert that extra bedroom into a proper home office for me. I know you use it for storage, but all those old military things could go in the attic, right? All those old military things included my service medals, Catherine's hope chest, and the flag that had draped her coffin. Sure, I said. Whatever you want. Her smile was dazzling. See you at the altar, handsome. I watched her drive away in her BMW. A gift from me for her birthday 3 months ago. Then I called Rachel. It's all set for tomorrow, I told her. You know what to do. I'm on it, she confirmed. But David, are you sure about this? It's going to be intense. I'm sure, I said, watching the tail lights of Vanessa's car disappear around a corner. Some things need to be done right. That night, I made one more call to Marcus Blackwell. I'd found his number in Vanessa's phone during my investigation. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice wary. Who is this? David Hartwell, I said. Vanessa's fiancé. Or should I say Victoria's? There was a long silence. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do, Marcus. You and Vanessa have quite the operation going. Atlanta, Memphis, now Charleston. You're branching out. Look, man. I think you've got the wrong. Save it, I cut him off. I've seen the texts. I know about the plan. What I don't know is whether you're aware that she's planning to double-cross you once she gets control of my assets. Another silence, longer this time. What do you mean? In her little notebook, she's got plans for the money. Your share keeps getting smaller and smaller in each draft. The most recent version doesn't mention you at all. That lying, he stopped himself. What do you want from me? I want you at my wedding tomorrow. First Presbyterian, 2 p.m. When I give the signal, you walk in. That's all. And why would I do that? Because I've already shared everything I know with Special Investigator Reynolds from Financial Crimes. She'll be there, too. If you cooperate with us, maybe you can cut a deal. If not. I let the threat hang in the air. Marcus sighed heavily. Fine. But this is the last time. After tomorrow, I'm done with Vanessa. I think she'll be done with both of us, I replied. I slept surprisingly well that night. There's a clarity that comes with certainty, even when what you're certain about is painful. I woke up, showered, and dressed in my uniform rather than the suit I'd had fitted. Medals and ribbons in place, shoes polished to a mirror shine. If I was going to do this, I would do it as the man I truly was, not the lovesick fool Vanessa thought she'd ensnared. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. at First Presbyterian, the church my family had attended for generations. By 1 p.m., guests were already filing in. By 1:30, the sanctuary was packed. I stood in a side room, peering through a crack in the door, watching as Charleston's finest took their seats, programs in hand, excitement in their eyes. Jake found me there. Damn, David. The uniform. Bold choice. Vanessa know about the change of plans. She'll find out, I said, adjusting my cuffs. Jake gave me a strange look. You okay, buddy? You seem different today. Never better, I assured him. Which was, in its own way, the absolute truth. At precisely 2 p.m., the organist began to play. Not the wedding march, not yet, but the processional for the bridal party. First came the bridesmaids, Vanessa's friends from her book club and yoga class, women I barely knew. Then my groomsmen, Jake, Chris, and 2 other friends from my military days. Rachel walked down last as my best woman, a role she'd insisted on when I first got engaged. She caught my eye as she took her place, giving me a small nod. The music changed. The wedding march began. Everyone stood, turning to the back of the church where the double doors were slowly opening. And there she was. Vanessa, a vision in white lace and tulle, her arm linked with her Uncle George's since her own father was long out of the picture. She was objectively beautiful, her hair swept up in an elegant chignon, her makeup flawless, her smile radiant. If I hadn't known what lay beneath that smile, I might have been moved. As it was, I felt nothing but a cold, hard certainty. She processed slowly down the aisle, her eyes fixed on mine, her smile never wavering. When she reached the altar, her uncle placed her hand in mine and we turned to face Pastor Mitchell. Dearly beloved, he began, his voice resonant in the hushed church. We are gathered here today in the sight of God and this company to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. I let him continue through the opening remarks, my hand still holding Vanessa's, feeling her pulse thrumming rapidly against my palm. Excitement, anticipation of victory, it didn't matter anymore. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, Pastor Mitchell was saying, but reverently, discreetly, advisedly, and in the fear of God. I almost laughed at the irony. If any person can show just cause why these two should not be joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The traditional pause. The church was silent except for someone coughing discreetly in the back row. Well then, continued Pastor Mitchell with a smile. David Hartwell, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Do you promise to love her, comfort her, honor and keep her, in sickness and in health, forsaking all others, keeping yourself only unto her, for as long as you both shall live? The moment had arrived. I turned to face Vanessa fully, taking both her hands in mine. Her eyes shone with what anyone else would have mistaken for tears of joy. Before I answer that, I said, my voice carrying easily in the perfect acoustics of the old church, there's something I need to say. A murmur rippled through the congregation. Vanessa's smile flickered, but held. David, she whispered. What are you doing? I dropped her hands and turned to face our guests. I want to thank you all for coming today. It means a lot to have so many friends and family here to witness this important moment in my life. More murmurs. Pastor Mitchell shifted uncomfortably beside me. I've lived in Charleston all my life. Most of you have known me for years, even decades. You know I'm a man of my word, a man of honor. I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the pews. That's why what I'm about to do is so difficult, but necessary. Vanessa grabbed my arm. David, stop it. You're embarrassing me, she hissed. I gently removed her hand. 3 days ago, I went to surprise my fiancée with flowers. When I arrived at her mother's house, I overheard a conversation. A conversation that changed everything. The church was dead silent now. From the corner of my eye, I saw Rachel move to the side aisle as planned, ready for her part. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the recorder Sophia Reynolds had given me. Rather than try to explain, I think it's best if you hear it for yourselves. Before Vanessa could react, I pressed play. The recording was crystal clear. Don't worry so much, Mom. Everything's going according to plan. I just don't like playing with fire, honey. David seems like a decent man. Decent. Sure. Decent house, decent pension, decent life insurance policy. It's all very decent. And what if he wants a prenup? He's not stupid, Vanessa. Already handled. I've been dropping little comments about how prenups are so unromantic. How they're for people who don't really believe in forever. He ate it up with a spoon. And if he finds out about Marcus? He won't. Marcus knows to lay low until after the wedding. Once I'm Mrs. David Hartwell, it gets a lot harder for David to cut me out, even if things go south. I stopped the recording there, though there was more, much more, including the chilling reference to widowhood. The silence in the church was absolute, heavy with shock. Vanessa's face had drained of all color. That's not, it's been edited. It's fake, she sputtered. Is it? I asked quietly. Is Marcus fake, too? On cue, the church doors opened. Marcus walked in, tall, dark-haired, handsome in a polished suit. The men from the photos, the men who had been part of her scheme all along. Vanessa's eyes widened in horror. Marcus, what are you, why are you? Marcus looked as uncomfortable as a man possibly could. I'm sorry, Vanessa. When Mr. Hartwell contacted me yesterday and explained the situation, I couldn't be part of this anymore. Not when I found out you were planning to cut me out after all we've been through. The guests were openly talking now, heads turning back and forth between the drama at the altar and the newcomer standing in the aisle. You contacted him. Vanessa whirled on me, her beautiful features contorted with rage. You had no right. I had every right, I said calmly. You were planning to commit fraud, to marry me under false pretenses, to take what I've worked my entire life for. That's not, you don't understand. She was floundering, looking desperately around the church as if for an ally. Her mother was sitting in the front row, her face in her hands. I understand perfectly, I continued. And so does everyone else now. I nodded toward the back of the church where Sophia Reynolds stood, holding up her badge. So does Special Investigator Reynolds from the Department of Financial Crimes. Isn't that right, Investigator? Reynolds walked forward, her badge clearly visible. Victoria Palmer, also known as Vanessa Parker, you're under investigation for multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny across 3 states. A collective gasp went through the congregation. Vanessa's face contorted with fury and fear. This is absurd. He's lying. They're all lying. She turned to the crowd, suddenly desperate. He's just having cold feet. This is some sick joke. It's no joke, I said, pulling out my phone. I found your notebook, Vanessa. Your plan for me, just like your plans for Gerald Thompson and Howard Pierce and William Chandler in Atlanta. How many others have there been? You went through my things. She hissed, her face ugly with rage. You had no right. No right. You were planning to steal everything I own. You talked about wanting me dead for the insurance money, and you're upset about privacy. Another gasp from the congregation. I hadn't planned to reveal that part, but my anger had gotten the better of me. Vanessa lunged for the phone in my hand, but Rachel was quicker, stepping between us. Don't even think about it, she warned. This isn't over, Vanessa snarled, backing away. You'll regret this, all of you. She turned to run, but found her path blocked by 2 uniformed police officers who had been waiting outside. Victoria Palmer, one of them said. You're under arrest for violation of probation and crossing state lines while under investigation for felony charges. As they read her rights and led her away, the church erupted in a chaos of voices and movement. I stood still at the altar, watching as years of deception finally caught up with Vanessa. Her mother tried to slip out a side door, but was stopped by another officer. Pastor Mitchell placed a hand on my shoulder. "David, I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry." "Don't be," I replied, suddenly exhausted. "A marriage built on lies is no marriage at all." I turned to address the stunned congregation. "I apologize for the theatrics, but I believed you all deserved to know the truth, especially those of you who traveled so far to be here." A stunned silence hung in the air for a moment. Then, from somewhere in the back, someone began to clap. Slowly at first. Then others joined in. Not celebratory applause, more like acknowledgement. Respect perhaps. Rachel stepped forward. "If everyone would please proceed to the Charleston Hotel, we'll continue the event there. The food and drinks are paid for. No sense in letting it go to waste. Thank you for your understanding." People began to rise, the buzz of conversation growing louder. Some looked shocked, others secretly delighted at the scandal unfolding before them. A few of the older ladies were fanning themselves vigorously. I walked down the aisle alone, conscious of the eyes following me, the whispers, the people reaching out to touch my arm in support or sympathy. Jake fell into step beside me. "That," he said under his breath, "was the most badass thing I've ever seen you do. And I once watched you drag 2 wounded men through gunfire." "Different kind of battlefield," I replied. Outside, the May sunshine was blinding after the dimness of the church. I paused on the steps, breathing in the salt-tinged air, feeling lighter than I had in months. Sophia Reynolds approached me, her expression professional but with a hint of respect. "That was quite a show, Mr. Hartwell. Unorthodox, but effective. Will the charges stick?" I asked. "With the evidence we've gathered and Marcus's cooperation, yes. She'll be facing serious time." She handed me her card. "We'll need an official statement from you." "You'll have it." "What about her mother?" "Accessory charges most likely." She knew what was happening and facilitated it. Reynolds glanced at her watch. "I need to get to the station. We'll be in touch." As she walked away, Rachel joined me on the steps. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. "Yeah, I really am." "Good." She bumped her shoulder against mine. "Because you just became Charleston's most eligible bachelor again. Janet Mitchell was asking if you might be interested in her book club once the dust settles." "Pastor Mitchell's daughter?" "She's 35. 37, Rachel corrected, grinning. "And she's always had a thing for men in uniform." I groaned. Too soon. Way too soon. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching as the last of the guests made their way to cars and headed toward the reception that would now be a very different kind of gathering. "You coming to the hotel?" Rachel asked. I shook my head. "Not right away. I need some time." She nodded, understanding. "I'll handle it. Take all the time you need." I watched her walk away, then turned and headed for my truck. But instead of going home, I drove to the cemetery where Catherine was buried. It had been a while since my last visit. Too long. I sat on the bench beside her grave, the one I'd had installed so I could talk to her in comfort. "You wouldn't believe the day I've had, Kath," I said softly. "Actually, you probably would. You always could spot a phony a mile away." I stayed there for an hour, telling my late wife about everything that had happened, imagining her reactions, her advice. By the time I left, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the rows of headstones. I drove to Sullivan's Island, to my house, not ours, and changed out of my uniform. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and walked down to the water's edge, kicking off my shoes to feel the sand between my toes. The tide was coming in, the waves growing stronger as the afternoon waned. I stood there for a long time, watching the water, letting the reality of what had just happened wash over me. The humiliation, the anger, the relief. My phone buzzed constantly in my pocket. Texts, calls, probably a lot of questions. I ignored it. Tomorrow would be soon enough to deal with the aftermath. Tonight was for reclaiming my peace. As the sun began to set, casting long golden rays across the water, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't need to turn to know it was Rachel. "How'd it go?" I asked as she came to stand beside me. "About as well as could be expected," she said, bending to pick up a shell. "Some people left, but most stayed. Free food and the scandal of the decade. Hard to pass up." I chuckled despite myself. "What's the verdict? Am I the villain or the hero?" "Depends who you ask. Most people are on your side, especially after Jake and Chris started telling stories about what a stand-up guy you've always been." She skipped the shell across the water. "Mrs. Harrison from the garden club said you should have just called it off privately. But Mr. Harrison told her, sometimes public justice is the only kind that sticks." "And Vanessa? Any news?" "Denied bail, flight risk." Rachel's expression hardened. "They found fake passports and over $50,000 in cash in her mother's attic. She was planning to run if things went south." I nodded, not surprised. "The BMW? Impounded as evidence. Apparently, she's done this before. Convinced Marks to buy her expensive cars, then sold them to fund her next con." We stood watching the waves in companionable silence as the light faded from the sky. Eventually, Rachel headed back to her car, making me promise to call if I needed anything. I stayed a while longer, until the first stars appeared. That night, I slept in my own bed, in my own house, with the windows open to the sound of the ocean. I dreamed of nothing and woke feeling more at peace than I had in a long time. In the weeks that followed, the story of the wedding that wasn't became Charleston legend, told and retold with varying degrees of embellishment in salons and golf clubs across town. I kept to myself at first, weathering the storm of gossip and well-meaning concern. But slowly, I rejoined the world. Had friends over for barbecues. Went fishing with Jake and Chris. Started volunteering at the VA hospital, something I'd done regularly before meeting Vanessa. 6 months later, I testified at Vanessa's trial. She didn't look at me once during my testimony, staring straight ahead with the same blank expression she'd maintained throughout the proceedings. She was sentenced to 12 years for multiple counts of fraud and identity theft. Her mother received 5 years probation and was ordered to pay restitution to several of Vanessa's victims. Marcus Blackwell, true to his word, cooperated fully with the investigation. He received a reduced sentence of 3 years in exchange for his testimony against not just Vanessa but several other accomplices in their network of cons. Sophia Reynolds called me the day after the sentencing. "We've identified 6 other victims across 4 states, she told me. "Thanks to your evidence and testimony, they'll be getting some justice, too." "That's something at least," I said. "It's more than something, Mr. Hartwell. Most of these cases never make it to trial. Victims are too embarrassed to come forward. You changed that." As for me, life went on. The scandal faded as scandals do, replaced by newer, juicier gossip. I kept my house on Sullivan's Island, my routines, my friends. I even joined a pottery class at the community center, something I'd always wanted to try but had never found the time for. Sometimes people ask if I regret how I handled things. If I couldn't have found a less dramatic way to end my relationship with Vanessa. Maybe I could have. But there's something to be said for standing up and speaking the truth, even when, especially when, it's uncomfortable. I don't know if I'll ever marry again. I'm not closed to the possibility, but I'm also content with my life as it is. I have my home, my friends, my community. I have my memories of Catherine untarnished by guilt or compromise. And I have my self-respect. In the end, that's what Vanessa was really after. Not just my money or my house, but my dignity. The one thing I refused to give her. Last week, I ran into Janet Mitchell at the farmer's market. We talked for a while about nothing in particular, and then she invited me to her book club. I surprised myself by saying yes. It's not a date, just a book club. But it's a start. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making someone pay for what they've done. It's living well in spite of it. Moving forward, finding joy in the small things again. Vanessa wanted to break me, to use me, to leave me with nothing. Instead, she's the one who lost everything while I'm still here, watching the waves roll in on Sullivan's Island, planning my next chapter.